Hello, my name is Richard Doty. I'm a former intelligence officer with the Air Force Office of Special Investigations. Today, we're going to discuss a very controversial subject within the UFO community, the SERPO story, or Project Crystal Night. Now, a lot of people within the UFO community know about this subject, about what allegedly happened back in the 60s. Was there an exchange program between extraterrestrials and US astronauts? Did we send astronauts to the planet Serpo and they sent visitors or a diplomat to the United States or to Earth? I don't know. These questions have been lingering out within the UFO community for many, many, many years. In May of 2005, a retired Defense Intelligence Agency employee first mentioned Project Crystal Night on the internet. It went around in an email between a number of different people. It pertained to an exchange program between US astronauts and extraterrestrial race from Zeta Reticuli star system. How do we know about Zeta Reticuli? Well, back in the early 60s, Barney and Betty Hill was allegedly abducted by ETs on a drive in New England. Betty Hill told a story of a star chart that was shown to her by the ETs that abducted her. And this star chart she drew. She drew a chart, but she didn't know what it was because she wasn't trained in astronomy. Other people that interviewed her realized that what she was trying to draw was the Zeta Reticuli star group, meaning that maybe these aliens that had abducted her came from that Zeta Reticuli star system. And that's why we're talking about Zeta Reticuli. Enter Victor Martinez. Victor Martinez had an email distribution list which contained the retired DIA employee. But over the time between May of 2005 and the fall of 2005, 23 different former U.S. intelligence officers came out to verify that Project Crystal Night was a real UFO U.S. government program. Mr. Anonymous related the real story about Roswell. So let's go and briefly talk about what happened in Roswell. 2 ET crafts crashed in Roswell in 1947. One ET craft landed near Corona. The second craft crashed near Pelona Peak, south of Daddle, in western part of New Mexico. That crash site wasn't found until 1949. The Corona crash site was found a day later by an archaeological team. Contacted the local sheriff. The U.S. military came in and recovered the craft. The second craft site that happened in 1949, or happened in 1947, but wasn't found until 1949, was recovered by a rancher moving his cattle from one location to another. That was recovered by then U.S. Air Force personnel from Kirtland Field. Remember, the Air Force came into existence in 1947, September 1947. The U.S. Army, Air Force, and these 2 crash sites recovered debris. And remember, in the Corona crash, we found a live ET, who we named EBA, based on the wording extraterrestrial biological entity. And that name was coined by a U.S. Army scientist. The live ET was transported to Los Alamos Laboratories, which at the time was the safest and the most secure place on Earth. Communications were established with EBA. EBA provided us with advanced communications and other technology from the craft. A communications link was established between Earth and EBA's home planet, which the U.S. intelligence agency called SERPO. Now today, I'm going to tell you exactly what SERPO means. I don't think this has ever been disclosed before. Secret Extraterrestrial Remote Planet Operations, and that was coined by the Defense Intelligence Agency. EBA civilization created a method to communicate faster than light speed. Now, I don't have time in this presentation to explain the technical methods of communications faster than the speed of light. How do we do that? Remember, the speed of light is a distinct speed, 186,000 miles per second. But somehow, the ETs found a way to move the communications faster. EBA wanted to set up this process in order to get back to his home planet. Remember, he was in the Corona crash site. He was recovered. He was being cared for by us, U.S. Army, Air Force back then, but he missed home. He wanted to go home. Unfortunately, he died in 1952, but he gave us enough information and taught us some of his language in order for us to continue this communications between Earth and his own planet. And I believe the time frame between sending a signal and getting it back was approximately 9 months. Now remember, SERPO was in a Zeta Reticuli star group, which was 37.9 light years away. So instead of sending a signal would take 37 years or 38 years to get there, another 38 years to get back, which wasn't practical, we were able to do everything based on the EBA, or the EBN communications device, in about a 9-month period. And I'm saying 9 months because I believe it actually varied. U.S. intelligence established Earth receiving stations in New Mexico, Peru, Australia, and Chile in order to utilize this communication system that EBA gave us. Several U.S. contractors were able to take the technology given to us by EBA and create a system to send faster than light, or FTL they call them, messages to SERPO. I'm not going to go into how this happened, but we were able to do it. And our technology today, we do have experimental programs to be able to send signals faster than the speed of light. I can't go into details on it because I know very little about it than what I just mentioned. Let's talk about the beginning of the SERPO story. The President Truman was briefed on information from EBA. Alan Dulles, who was a director of Central Intelligence back in those days, briefed President Truman on the fact that EBA was live ET was found at a crash site. Later on, President Eisenhower formed a special commission of space scientists which controlled the information that we collected and the distribution of the collection of the data. We maintained this and we circulated it throughout the government in a very secretive way. This group of people were later called MJ, or the Majestic 12. However, I believe technically there were more than 12 involved in this program. I believe there were something like 20 and possibly as many as 30 people involved in this MJ or Majestic program. The plan that this MJHO group allegedly created involved selecting a group of U.S. military personnel who were totally cleared of any past life obligations, such as marriage, family ties, etc. The group would be trained in a total classified environment, and the group would be divorced from the military records. We call that sheep dipping. It occurs today. People who are brought from the outside into the military and sent on special assignments, deep cover operations. Their identity is wiped clean, or we call sheep dipped. The group would receive special training for the space travel. Once a group was selected, they would be totally isolated from human contact until the mission. Now, allegedly, according to what DIA officials and these people that were leaking this information to Victor Martinez and others, talk about how these teams were trained, where they were trained. And they differ, the training was differed based on who was reporting this information. But according to Mr. Anonymous, the team trained for 42 months. The training took place at classified locations throughout the world. The mission called for the team to take approximately 90,000 pounds of equipment, including weapons and supplies that would last several years. The mission to Planet Serpo would last 10 years, but we didn't know the time periods involved or the time system on the Planet Serpo. So the mission could actually last longer because the rotation of the Planet Serpo was different than the rotation of Earth. We have a 24-hour clock. The Serpo had a different type of clock. However, the project directors could not determine exactly how long this would last, so they estimated this could be as long as 20-year mission. In 2005, Anonymous came forward at a UFO convention in Laughlin. He privately provided several key officials with names and details about 3 survivors who returned from Serpo mission. Now, that shocked everyone at the convention. This person, who we verified was a Defense Intelligence Agency employee, he served with the Defense Intelligence Agency for over 30 years. He gave us the names, the actual names of 3 survivors. And we were going to be able to interview these 3 survivors. Joseph Yeager claimed to be one of the former mission directors for Project Crystal Night. Now, people within the UFO community know the name Joseph Yeager. He spoke before at conventions, UFO conventions. He has spoken on some podcasts, some YouTube videos are still probably out there with his name on it. Years ago, in the beginning of the internet, beginning of websites, beginning of podcasts, he was interviewed by Art Bell back in about 92 or 93. Not mentioning Project Serpo back in those days, but he did mention one particular UFO researcher found a mention of Project Crystal Night back in the 1990s. Yeager provided 600 cassette tapes allegedly made by the team commander during the journey to Serpo and while on the Planet Serpo. Now, here we have 600 tapes recordings of the team commander. Were these tapes real? Did they contain extraordinary information about the planet, about the space travel from Earth to the Planet Serpo, which, according to some, took about 9 months? Remember, the planet was 37.9 light years away from Earth. In Earth terms, even if we were traveling the speed of light, it would take us 38 years to get there. But the Ebens had some sort of method to travel that distance in only 9 months. Obviously, faster than the speed of light, or through some type of wormhole. How was that done? Well, Yeager also provided a mission log allegedly made by the team commander. The log contained 1,800 pages of notes from the alleged mission to Serpo. Victor Martinez created a website which was in existence until 2020, which detailed everything that occurred regarding the Serpo story. Again, the website has been taken down, but during the time the website was up, which is about 15 years, it contained cassette recordings and the mission log, telling the readers or the listeners exactly what happened during that space journey. It's an extraordinary tape. The tapes are extraordinary to listen to, and the logs are quite unbelievable to read. everything that they experienced, the anomalies of space travel, the sicknesses contracted, the death of one of the astronauts en route to Serpo. All these things were detailed in this log and on these tapes. Now, where are these tapes today? Well, the tapes were in possession of Joseph Yeager, who died some years ago. So unfortunately, we haven't been able to locate the tapes, but we have a good idea where they are. Where would you think they would be? Well, the DIA figured that they shouldn't be out in the public anymore. So they were probably obtained by the DIA and sent back to Washington, DIA headquarters at Bolling Air Force Base, locked up in somebody's safe. Now, there are people out there who will claim that this mission was actually a disinformation campaign created by the United States government to fool the Russians or the Soviets back in those days. Now, stop and think. If the Russian government knew we were in contact with extraterrestrials, or the extraterrestrials were cooperating with the United States, especially the United States military, in providing information, maybe weapon systems, space travel techniques, or propulsion systems, it would fool the Russians into thinking, wow, the United States are or is that far ahead of us in technology, or could be that far ahead of us in technology. That's a possibility. Maybe this was a disinformation campaign. Maybe this was a highly planned deception, military deception operations, which the military calls, the civilians would call it disinformation campaign. Maybe this happened. But stop and think about it. Do you think the government would spend the time to create 600 discs, tapes, recordings, logs, 1,800-page logs? These 3 survivors who were interviewed by some key officials, such as Wendell Stevens, Robert Dean, even Art Bell, even myself. I sat down in a room with one of them, the commander. He was sick. He was over 90 years old. He had cancer several different times and it had been cured, but he was just really old. He sat there in a room with us, with some others, talking about the mission, verifying that it happened, at least to us. I mean, he is just one person. He has evidence. Do we want to believe him? There's a lot of parts of the Serpo story that is truly believable. But then again, there's a lot of other parts to it that's just not believable. The science, I'm not a scientist, but the science on Serpo would defy our science, would defy our physics. Now, and Serpo is in our galaxy. So all physics in our galaxy should be the same. Now, I understand that there's scientists out there, including some really top scientists, one I used to work for, Dr. Hal Puthoff, that said if you go to another galaxy that spins differently, it's not a spiral galaxy, maybe the physics is different. But Serpo's 37 light years away or within the Milky Way galaxy. So all physics should be the same. So why would physics be different on Serpo, which was reported by these alleged survivors? That's something that they can't explain, we can't explain, and scientists can't explain. So that's something that probably throws a wrench in this matter. But some of the other things that the commander talks about, the space sickness, he got emotional when he talked about getting in that alien craft and flying and watching one of his crew members die of sickness, and watch how the ETs or the EBINs managed that, and how the EBINs then treated the Americans to prevent this sickness from happening to them. So all these things were explained. I sat there and listened to them. Now, I didn't talk to the other two. I only talked to the commander. I'm sorry to say that there's a lot of things that he said that confused me. And at the end, I would have to say it was 50-50, considering whether it was a true story, whether this actually happened, this mission took place, or it was a deception operation by the United States military to fool the Soviets and this was would be back in the 60s. Maybe scaring the Russians into thinking, we have things that you don't have, and you better be careful about trying to start a first strike against us. Something like that. And that's a possibility. So what I do is I'm going to present you with both sides, which I just did, and let the viewers decide whether the Serpo story or Project Crystal Night was factual or was it a deception operation by the United States military. This concludes my presentation. I hope you enjoy it. I'm Richard Doty. Until next time, thank you.